Howdy and welcome to the Catholic Tech Table. I am Andrew Robison, president and owner of Petrus Development, and your host for this episode of the Catholic Tech Table. On this show, we talk all about, particularly as it relates to use within the Catholic Church and even deeper, more specific niche into how it works within Catholic fundraising at Catholic nonprofits. So on today's episode, we are going to be talking about something that is probably pretty basic. Well, it is pretty basic, but if you're new to AI, this might be helpful to you. We're going to be talking about the difference between Google and a large language model or an LLM, such as ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, Grok, all of that. So I'll be talking about what the differences are between them, and then how you as a fundraiser or as somebody working in ministry can make use of each tool depending on what your needs are. Cool. So we're going to dive in and start talking about this right now. And I also will be sharing my screen just to show you some of the examples as I'm working through them. So the simplest way that I can suggest you think about Google versus an LLM is Google is a librarian and an LLM or Chat or Claude is a conversation partner, right? So Google is good for finding sources. It's for finding new and sort of current information. If you need to search the internet and find websites or find resources, Google is definitely the place to go for that. It's kind of like a librarian, right? Where the librarian, you can go ask him or her, what book should I read on this topic? They're going to point you to those, but then it's up to you to read through those resources and find the information. So that's how Google is, right? It'll point you to the right information, where it is, the source of where it came from, so you know that it's accurate information, but then it's up to you to go through those websites and read it, right? An LLM is like a conversation partner. So it's a research partner. It's somebody who can help you to brainstorm. It can help you to create content. It can help you to synthesize information, but it's not going to give you the sources unless you ask for it. And it's oftentimes not going to search the internet for current information unless you ask specifically for it. So an LLM might be, so in the analogy of, right, you go to the library, you ask the librarian, what information should I have? They're going to send you these books, you read them. And LLM is you ask your research partner, hey, put together all the information that you know on this topic. It's going to synthesize it. It's going to go out to find that source, find that information from its sources that it's been trained on. It's going to put it together for you, and then it's going to give it to you. So there are pros and cons to Google, and there's pros and cons to LLM, but that's basically how I think of that is a librarian versus a conversation or a research partner. So now you're probably thinking, where should I use Google and where should I use an LLM? So Google, the times that you want to use that is if you're looking for current information, if you're looking for specific information about your organization or an organization that you're researching, to verify facts, if you're looking for product reviews. There's a lot of use for Google within fundraising, and that's some of them. So some examples of things that you might type into Google is, what did the bishop say about stewardship in his last pastoral letter? Or what are the current rules on charitable gift annuities at the end of 2025, right? What are some CRM companies? And give me some reviews on them, right? So that's going out into the internet. It's going out into the web. It's finding the information, and then it's putting it together where you can search through it and you can find it, right? And it's current and it's accurate. At least it could be accurate, right? You can check those sources, but you're going directly to the sources for that information. So an LLM would be like, hey, I need to brainstorm ideas, or can you help me draft a letter for my donors, or can you help me explain complex topics or subjects in easy to understand ways, right? So some things you might put into an LLM, into Chat or into Claude is, I've got a thank you letter that needs to go to a donor. Can you draft me a first copy? Or help me explain planned giving, or help me explain charitable gift annuities in a way that somebody with my level of education and understanding and background on this would understand, so that I can explain it. So again, it's about kind of starting with broad information. It's going to go out and assemble the information in a way that you're asking for it, right? And then it's going to synthesize and give you that information back. So again, Google, you're going to use it when you're looking for source information, when you're looking for product reviews, or when you're looking for current information about an announcement or news, and an LLM, chat, or Claude is, help me draft this idea, help me put together some content on this, or help me explain this idea in a way that is understandable to all. And one way that you can use both together is you Google information about charitable gift annuities, and then you take that information from the websites that you got it from, you plug it into chat, and you say, now help me explain this in a way to my donors that they'll understand, right? So that's a way that you can combine and use both with a single example. So I've talked about the difference between Google and LLMs. What are some of the downsides to large language models? What can Chat and Claude not do? One thing that you may not know is that they are trained, and that training, the information that they're fed, has a cutoff date. So you can go ask Chat who won the local election last month, and it's not going to know the information because it wasn't in the information that it was trained on. Right? So current information, you definitely, today's news reports, you definitely want to use sources like Google or another search engine, not an LLM. Another weakness of LLMs is that they can be wrong. And when they're wrong, they're often very confident about being wrong. So that's called a hallucination, where it either makes up information or it feeds you inaccurate or incorrect information, and you don't know it because it's telling you in a way that it's very confident about, right? So this happened one time. I was researching for a presentation. I wanted some statistics on, I think, if you make phone calls, how often people will pick up, right? And so I asked Chat. It gave me the information. It said from this Harvard Business Review article, 70% it was the statistic. So I said, great. So I sent that on to another person on the team, and they came back and they said, I can't find the information. Can you give me the source? So I go back to the conversation I was having with Chat, and I said, can you give me the source? It said September 2022, this article came out in Harvard Business Review. I said, great. So I sent that over, and he comes back and he says, not finding that information in that Harvard Business Review article. So I went back to Chat and I said, I can't find this information. Can you give me the actual source, the link to the website? And it came back and it said, sorry, that website actually doesn't exist. So I was like, what the heck? So I said, Chat, why did you give me this if it's not accurate? He said, well, I'm sorry. Sometimes I don't know all the information, but I want to be helpful. So here's some other websites, or here's some other studies that are kind of similar in scope. And I was like, that's not helpful, Chat. What the heck? And he said, sorry, I apologize. It was actually kind of a fun conversation, but it was very confident in that information. It even told me where I could find it. But then when I dug in and asked for the specific website source, it couldn't give it to me. So you got to be very careful with LLMs. If you're asking for stats or information, always ask for it to give you the citation where you can go find it and confirm it. And then the other weakness of an LLM is that it doesn't have information about your specific organization or something that you're looking for specifically, right? So let's say you work for a parish and you're trying to put together a report on end of year giving, and you want to draw from some of the letters that your pastor has put out or homilies. The LLMs aren't trained on the information, so it doesn't have it to give you. So that's a situation where you do need to go to Google, find the information. You can then cite it to Chat or to Claude or to Gemini and say, use this to help me draft a letter. But without doing that, it doesn't know the information. So LLMs are helpful research partners, but they're not oracles. They don't know everything, and they can't tell you all the information that you want just because you're asking it. So I've got 3 challenges for you in order to put this information to use back in your office or back at your house. Challenge number 1, Google something that you want to know the information to. Very simple. What did Pope Leo say about AI in his last presentation, right? Something that an LLM chat is not going to know the information to. Remember, either current events, specific organization or institutional events. So Google something, right? Challenge number 2, go to one of these LLMs, ChatGPT, Claude, I think Gemini. They all have free sources if you don't want to pay. And there's limits on how much you can search, but you're very unlikely you're going to hit that, especially not with this challenge. But go into there and ask it to do a task for you, right? So say, draft me a thank you letter for an end of year appeal. Here's a little bit of information. So use Chat or use Claude or use Gemini to do something for you. Challenge number 3 is to combine it, right? So my example earlier was I'm going to Google information about tax rules or tax donation cutoffs. I find that information and then I'm going to plug it into Chat or to Claude and say, here's the information, explain this to me in a way that I can explain it to my donors. So using both together is your third challenge. I'd love to hear how it goes. Send me an email or leave a comment here if you do this challenge and you want to share with me kind of what you thought was better, what worked best. I'd love to hear it. Andrew@petrusdevelopment.com. You can always email me there. So that's it for today's episode of the Catholic Tech Table. Thank you for joining me. Remember, Google is your librarian. LLMs are your conversation or your research partners. Use them like that. Try to find ways to make best use of them depending on your situation, but there is application for both in your day and in your work. Next episode, we're going to be talking about how these LLMs are trained. So I talked a little bit about that when I was talking about cutoff dates, right? How they're trained, the information. We're going to do a deep dive into how these LLMs are trained so you can understand them, so you can know even more clearly what are their strengths and what are their weaknesses. Until then, keep working on these challenges, keep coming back, ask us for questions, and keep diving in, learning more about how you can make use of these tools and these resources for the building of the kingdom. Thanks. I'm Andrew. We'll see you next time.